Hi, Andy XL back with another NFXL podcast. This is my week 10 good week, bad week. So we came into this week with just 9 weeks remaining for teams to secure their postseason spot, then go for the top seedings, home field advantage, and a possible first week bye in the playoffs. For some, their hopes of making it that far are in the balance or fading, whilst a few teams have already given up on this season and will be looking to evaluate how can they do better in 2026. So whose position improved in week 10 and who's took a nosedive? Well, that's the purpose of good week, bad week. So let's get on to the good week, guys. And nobody had a better week than the New England Patriots. This was a really, really good week for the Patriots as they notched up another fine win on the road in Tampa, whilst the Bills suffered a shock defeat. And the pleasing thing for them here was that this was done on offense, primarily down to three players that have not been the leaders for this team. Trevayon Henderson, Mac Hollins, and a 72-yard touchdown from Kyle Williams show that the Pats have the offensive depth to cover for the bigger names on their roster. This will be one of the last teams to take their bye in week 14. Before then, they would be top of the AFC East and could secure a postseason spot by winning two of their next three against the Jets, Bengals, and Giants. So it's far from a tough run of games. So they could definitely come out of week 10 feeling very happy about things, and they might be even happier by the time they get to their bye in week 14. Another good week for the Seattle Seahawks. They absolutely blew the Cardinals away in the first 22 minutes. Three offensive and two defensive touchdowns, putting the win on the board before the Cardinals realised what was happening. From there on, they got a little bit sloppy, but just played functional football to gain another win that puts them close to postseason qualification. They and the Rams have pulled clear of the 49ers in the NFC West and meet in week 11 in what could be a pivotal game in deciding who enters the postseason as divisional champions and who takes the wildcard path. But both teams are on course for the postseason for sure. So coming out of week 10, needing 3 wins from 8 games to make that postseason is a fine position for the Seahawks to be in. It was a good week for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they were again far from the levels of last season on offense, but a defense inspired by the addition of Jaden Phillips and the return of Nakobe Dean looked back to the levels the defense reached last season. They held the Packers' offense in check and shut them down on key plays as the Eagles got win number 7 that keeps them top of the NFC um, standings, despite them still having failed to be near their best. This win puts them in an almost uncatchable position in the NFC East, so they're almost certain to make the postseason, and their focus will start to narrow in on top seed in the NFC. They could take a step in that direction if they can beat the Lions in week 11, who are one of the rivals for that position, and then can pretty much wrap up the NFC East by beating the Cowboys in week 12. So all's going in the right direction for the Eagles. Just some performance issues on offense they need to sort out. When I say just, you know what I mean. A good week for the Houston Texans. When you go into a game knowing it's pretty much must win and you're without your starting quarterback, you really need to step up to keep yourself in contention. But then, if you find yourself 19 points down with 16 minutes left in the game, it would be easy to mentally fold and capitulate. But not these Texans, as they score four fourth quarter touchdowns to get a win that puts them right back in the AFC wildcard race. Winning this game and in this fashion should give them the base and impetus to go on a run now. And with a fine defense, they could just do that. They must start by beating Tennessee in week 18. Then they get a tough run of games against the Bills, Colts, and Chiefs. They need to win 3 of those to improve their postseason chances, though, with the Bills and especially the Chiefs games having huge wildcard significance. But none of that would have been conceivable if they had folded and lost this game in week 10. So this makes it a fine week for them. Sorry, quick drink. The Miami Dolphins, it was a good week for them. I've given the Dolphins enough stick this season, so it was only right that I recognise this fine win over the Bills that breathes a hint of life into their season of struggles. It is only one win, though, and they may need another 7 in a row to make the postseason, but every journey has to have a first step. And wherever this journey ends, the Dolphins can be proud of this fine win. The D really stood up to be counted here, and there is no doubt they have offensive talent in the shape of Jalen Waddle and Devon Ashane. This may be a case of too little too late, but you never know. The next 4 weeks see them play Washington, then have a bye, then face the Saints and Jets. So it is a soft part of their schedule and gives them a chance to maybe even get to 6-7 record after week 14. When you look at the next 3 games for them, it shows how significant this win over the Bills could be in prolonging their season as hopes. Right, Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens came into week 10 needing to continue their winning run and hope the Steelers opened the door a little wider for them in the AFC North, and that is exactly what happened. It may have been more workmanlike than spectacular on offense, but the defense is leading this comeback as they has kept their opponents under 20 points again this week. Week 11 results see them pull within one win of the Steelers. Now they get the Browns and Jets before 2 potentially pivotal AFC North games against the Bengals and then the Steelers. So winning what might well have been a pivotal game for them and the Vikings in week 10 sends the Ravens in the right direction into the next 4 games. And in their current form, they could well be top of the AFC North after week 14. Tickling the throat here. Los Angeles Rams had a good week too. Their week 10 game against the 49ers was the first of 2 huge in-division games for the Rams, and they pretty much cruised to a win that set them up for a possible divisional title decider against the Seahawks in week 11. That may well be a tougher assignment than beating the injury-depleted 49ers was, but this was a win they had to have, and they got it. And with Matt Stafford playing so well, the Rams themselves will be tough opposition for everybody they face, including the Seahawks. If they can get another win in week 11, then they get a chance to beat the Bucks in week 12, win both of those, and those will have weakened the challenges to them for both the NFC South title and top seeding in the NFC. And here's another team contending for top seed in the NFC, the Detroit Lions. They came back after a big setback loss in week 9. A weakened Commanders team gave the Lions the perfect opportunity to roar again in week 10, and they did just that. So the win was expected, but made it even more of a win they had to have. So getting it sets them up for a huge Monday night football clash with the Eagles in week 11. A win there would put them back in the hunt for top seeding in the NFC. A loss would probably end those hopes and put their postseason spot in doubt again as they drop back into the really tightly contested wildcard race in the NFC. But if they'd lost to the Commanders, that postseason berth would be in severe doubt. So they got the win they needed. A good week again for the Chicago Bears. Another win for the Bears has put them in the wildcard spot in the NFC after week 10. And they, like the Texans, needed a big comeback to get the win. 2 touchdowns in the last 5 minutes, lifting them past the Giants. And again, like the Texans, filling them with hope and expectation of the games ahead. Week 11 season playing one of the teams chasing them in the NFC wildcard race, the Vikings. So a win for the Bears in that one would further enhance their wildcard prospects before they host the Steelers in week 12. Their last 3 games of the season look tough, so they need to get a run of wins together before then. But as I say, they come out of week 10 feeling they can overcome pretty much anybody. And it was a good week for the Indianapolis Colts. Um, Following their train hitting the buffers in week 9, the Colts needed to get back on track and get a win over the Falcons to send them steaming into the later part of the regular season. And it may have taken overtime to get it after Das boot Michael Badgley tied the game in Berlin. But after another breathtaking performance from a runaway train that is Jonathan Taylor, they did the job, and he will need to be the fuel that keeps this train rolling into the postseason. But their win and the Jags' loss season extend their lead in the AFC South. 2 more wins could be enough to clinch that division. But they get to cool their engines in week 11 before they travel to KC in week 12. And after that come 2 chances to pretty much wrap up the AFC South for sure by beating the Texans and Jaguars. But if they had lost to the Falcons, they would be far less certain of making the postseason. So kudos to them and the magnificent Taylor in particular. Right, the Los Angeles Chargers and Denver Broncos both had good weeks. With the Chiefs on bye, this was a chance for the Chargers and Broncos to put more distance between them and the reigning AFC champions, and they both did just that. The Chargers did it in better style, beating the Steelers due to a really strong defensive performance and another great performance under almost constant duress from Justin Herbert at quarterback. It may not show up in a flashy stat line, but Herbert is definitely worthy of MVP consideration, given how weakened the O-line he's playing behind is. That may ultimately hurt them down the road, but for now they can celebrate taking another big step towards the postseason. The Broncos continue to get wins, despite, in all honesty, not playing well enough offensively to warrant an 8-2 record. But when you have a stellar D, you can get away with things like that. But as with the Chargers O-line, they have to be better offensively if they are to be more than just postseason participants. But this win takes them within 2 wins of pretty much securing that postseason berth. Week 11 presents them with an opportunity to show how good they can be against the Chiefs. But even if they come up short in that one, the following games at Washington and Las Vegas could see them get the 2 wins they need to secure postseason football. The Chargers would like the Chiefs to take down the Broncos in Week 11, allowing them, by beating the Jags, to pull level with Denver ahead of their Week 12 bye. But these wins keep both well on track for the postseason at the very least. So that's the good week, guys. Now there's a couple of teams here that is a bit of a good week, bad week scenario in themselves. First being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their home loss to the Pats was about making it a bad week for them in terms of both performance and for their hopes of a high seed in the NFC postseason bracket. But the losses for Panthers and Falcons mean they maintain their tight grip on top spot in the NFC South, with their opponents having 1 week less to make up the lost ground. They and the Bills meet the Bucks and the Bills meet in Week 11, both looking for bounce back wins that will get them back in their more positive mood. And after that, the Bucks face another tough road game against the Rams. The Bucks' last 6 games on their schedule are against 4 teams with losing records and 2 games against the team with a 500 record. But that team is the Panthers, who are the team chasing them in the NFC South. So take the potential pressure off those 2 last season games. It would help immensely if they could win one of their next 2 games. Cincinnati Bengals. They sat at home and watched the division-leading Steelers lose, but also saw the Ravens win to move past them in the AFC North. So with 2 teams to catch rather than 1, this is possibly more of a bad than good week for the Bengals and makes their Week 11 game with the Steelers pretty much must-win for them, which it probably was anyway, in all honesty. And a third team in the part good, part bad week category are the Dallas Cowboys. A bye week that saw all of the teams except 2 they're chasing in the NFC wildcard race lose and make it a good week for the Cowboys. Trouble is, the ones that won, the Bears and Lions, were 2 of those at the front of the pack, meaning the Cowboys may have it easier overtaking some teams ahead of them, but the ones they really need to catch have got further away, making it a potential bad week for them overall. And that moves us into the bad week category. And nobody had a worse week than the Buffalo Bills. I've said in these pieces before, if you're a team that suffers the biggest upset loss of the week, you are bound to have had a pretty bad week, and that certainly applies to the Bills here. Just as they were finding their best form, it all went wrong against the Dolphins. A James Cook fumble and a Josh Allen pick contributing to them getting blanked in the first half to trail by 16, and they failed to recover in the second half to fall to a costly loss. And their miserable week was compounded by the Patriots winning in Tampa to leave them all of a sudden a game and a half back of New England in the AFC East. It also puts them in dodgy position as they fall to 6th in the AFC standings ahead of a game with Tampa. Lose that and they will be in real danger of sliding out of the AFC wildcard spots. It was another bad week for the Washington Commanders. The injury-ravaged Commanders were always likely to find it tough against the Lions, but dismantled themselves during the game too. Daron Payne's ejection being symptomatic of a frustrated and demoralised team. Needing to win out from here and being in such a poor state physically and mentally, this defeat has surely ended their postseason hopes and makes this week a really bad week for them to endure. The Minnesota Vikings had a bad week. The Vikings lost to the Ravens, season fall adrift at the bottom of the NFC North, and needing to go 6-2 from here to have a shot at a wildcard berth. JJ McCarthy is showing signs of being good, but also struggling against quality defenses in a way you tend to see with a quarterback in the early stages of their NFL career. This was pretty much the story of a defeat that leads them in needing a sequence of wins to get towards back towards the front of the NFC wildcard race. Week 11 against the Bears is another huge game for them, as the Bears may be the team they're most likely to catch of those currently in wildcard spots in the NFC. It was a bad week for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had an important win in their hands, but let it slip as they fell to a costly loss to the Texans. These Jaguars are no longer the hunters, but look vulnerable prey as they have the Chiefs, Ravens, and Texans tracking them in the AFC wildcard race. And they will have to play better if they are to beat the Chargers in Week 11 to avoid losing further ground in the AFC wildcard race, as this defeat has all but handed the AFC title to the Colts. It was a bad week for the San Francisco 49ers. They lost the divisional title to a divisional title rival in the Rams and saw their other rival, the Seahawks, win to leave them trailing two teams that meet in Week 11. Barring a tied game between the Rams and Seahawks in Week 11, that means the 49ers must beat the Cardinals in Arizona to avoid falling 2.5 games behind the NFC West leading team. The 49ers just could not contain Matthew Stafford and the Rams' passing offense here, but did reasonably well offensively against a really good Rams D. But they never looked likely to win this game, and the need to get healthier is getting more urgent for them now if they're to make the postseason. It wasn't a great week for the Kansas City Chiefs, a bye week that saw the Chargers and Broncos pull further away from them and may have pretty much ended the Chiefs' hopes of retaining the AFC West title. So now they need to get themselves into a wildcard spot in the AFC. They are currently 8th in the conference standings. True, they still have to play the Broncos twice and the Chargers once. If they swept those games, they will be right back in the divisional picture. And the first of those is against the Broncos in Week 11. So a win helps them in both regards. However, lose that one and they may well be in severe danger of not making the postseason. Bad week for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and in a different way, the Steelers' position is becoming more precarious too, as their lead in the AFC North is vanishing behind a cloud of Ravens, down to one game now. And if they do not win the AFC North, would likely fall out of a wildcard spot too. After showing how good they could be at their best, excuse me, against the Colts in Week 9, they fell back to being well short of those levels in losing to the Chargers. Aaron Rodgers has got credit where credit was due this season, but he looked like an aging quarterback that he is, as the Steelers O-line did not protect him well, and he could not find his receivers quickly. His quick release, finding receivers has been the key to success this season. No chance in this. As winning the AFC North still looks like their best route to the postseason, the Week 11 game with the Bengals gives them a chance to get back to winning ways and practically eliminate one of the teams pursuing them in that particular race. Right, bad week for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers had a rotten day against the Saints, and their recent reliance on Rico Dowdle on the ground was thwarted by the Saints' defense. Bryce Young and his receivers were powerless to cover for Dowdle's quiet game, and that led to a loss that has let a lot of air out of the Carolina balloon. If they have to get back up in the air and find a jet stream that can take them to the postseason, they will need to do so in tricky conditions as they face the better than 3-6 Falcons, the 49ers, and Rams in the next 3 weeks. So it's a tough slate of games for them. Bad week for the Atlanta Falcons. Talking of the Falcons, their latest narrow loss to a very good team in the Colts backs up my better than 3-6 comment. They were a match for the 8-2 Colts in this game, but sometimes the belief and confidence you get from wins is enough to make the difference in tight games. Right now, the Colts have that, and the Falcons do not. But the fact they are good enough to compete with the best says brighter times could be ahead. But they may be more long-term than short-term following this loss, as they likely need to go 7-1 from here to make the postseason, making it a bad week for them. And rather than refer to them as irrelevant now, I've just rebranded this the last section as in other news, the New York Jets special teamed their way to a win over the Broncos, but apart from one big play, looked completely inept offensively. The Cleveland Browns have been great at finding different ways to lose, and here is another one to add to their repertoire. The New Orleans Saints and Tyler Shugg got a win, and that whilst may not have been pretty, improves Shugg's chances of being their starter for 2026 on two fronts. He got a win, played well, and they will get a worse draft pick to take a quarterback in the 2026 draft if he can add another win or two to this one. The New York Giants looked like they would beat the Bears, but faltered late. Still, at least they can win games, and they have Jackson Dart, but he's now in the concussion protocol. So The Arizona Cardinals got blown away in the first 16 minutes, rallied to some extent, but are a bit like the Giants. There was something there, but not enough to turn losses into wins. The Las Vegas Raiders could not overcome the Broncos D, but they are not the first to fall at that particular hurdle. However, the Geno Smith situation is certainly not getting any better. A bad season is a really bad season when you're on bye and you drop to the bottom of the NFC standings and gain possession of the first overall pick again. Such is life for the Tennessee Titans. And that wraps up good week, bad week for this week. So I'll see you soon when we start looking forward to week 11. See you for now.